Ethan Rhodes thought he married the woman of his dreams, but Clara Monroe had dreams of her own, and none of them included staying loyal to her husband. What began as a whirlwind romance between a quiet tech genius and a glamorous influencer quickly spiraled into a deadly web of lies, betrayal, and greed. When Ethan uncovered Clara's secret affairs with not one, but 3 different men, and her plot to cash in on his life insurance, the perfect marriage turned into a cold, blooded murder that shocked the nation. Ethan Rhodes had never been the kind of man to fall in love quickly. He lived a quiet, structured life in Denver, working long hours as a senior software engineer at a respected tech firm. With his modest condo, reliable car, and a small circle of friends, Ethan was content, even if life sometimes felt routine. Everything changed the night he met Clara Monroe. It was at a local charity gala, an event Ethan had reluctantly agreed to attend after being pressured by his coworkers. Clara arrived late, stepping into the venue like she owned the room. She was stunning, all poised with icy blue eyes and long blonde hair cascading down her back. She wore a glittering gold gown that shimmered under the lights, and her every movement seemed intentional, crafted for attention. Clara was a former model-turned-influencer, known online for her luxurious lifestyle and glamorous beauty tutorials. Her social media accounts boasted photos from tropical destinations, high-end restaurants, and brand collaborations. At the gala, she moved through the crowd with practiced elegance, but when she struck up a conversation with Ethan at the bar, she seemed surprisingly down to earth. She laughed at his dry sense of humor, complimented his intelligence, and said she found his job fascinating. Ethan was caught off guard. Someone like her, talking to someone like him. It felt surreal. Their chemistry was instant, but Ethan never suspected that Clara had come to that event looking for someone just like him, stable, financially secure, and emotionally sincere. Over the next few weeks, their connection deepened rapidly. Clara texted him constantly, planned spontaneous weekend trips, and introduced him to her influencer friends. Ethan felt flattered, swept off his feet by her affection and attention. Clara had a way of making every moment feel cinematic. She brought color and chaos into Ethan's orderly life, and he mistook it for love. Despite warnings from his friends that things were moving too fast, Ethan proposed to Clara after only 3 months of dating. She said yes before he could even finish the sentence. Their wedding was a lavish affair held at a lakeside resort, complete with drone photographers, a string quartet, and a champagne tower. Clara wore a custom gown flown in from Italy. The ceremony was live-streamed to her thousands of followers, who flooded the comment section with heart emojis and admiration. For Ethan, the wedding was the happiest day of his life. He believed he had found someone who made him feel alive, someone who accepted and adored him completely. But in truth, Clara saw Ethan as a means to an end. Her income from brand deals had been declining, her online engagement was dropping, and she was drowning in debt from maintaining her influencer image. Marrying Ethan wasn't about love, it was about survival. And now that she had legal access to his wealth, she could finally live the lifestyle she'd only been pretending to have. Ethan, blissfully unaware, had no idea that his new bride was about to drag him into the most painful chapter of his life. It didn't take long for cracks to begin forming in Ethan and Clara's marriage. The first few weeks after the wedding were filled with dinner dates, social events, and what seemed like marital bliss. Clara flooded her Instagram with romantic pictures of their honeymoon in Santorini, captioned with phrases like "forever mine" and "wifey vibes." But once the cameras were off and the vacation ended, Clara's behavior began to shift. She started staying out late, often claiming she had influencer events, brand meetings, or girls' nights. Ethan, ever trusting, didn't question her at first. He simply assumed this was part of her world, the glamorous, unpredictable life she had always led. But then she began coming home in the early hours of the morning, smelling of expensive cologne that wasn't his, and brushing off his concerns with vague excuses. Sometimes she wouldn't come home at all. The turning point came one day when Ethan logged into their shared credit card account to check a routine payment. What he saw sent a chill through him. Thousands of dollars had been charged to luxury hotels, high-end clothing boutiques, and private chauffeur services. He scrolled through the list in disbelief. Clara had spent more money in 1 week than he normally used in a month. When he asked her about it, she laughed it off and said it was all for business content, things she needed to maintain her brand. She accused him of being unsupportive and reminded him that her influencer status had helped elevate their image as a couple. Ethan didn't argue. He hated confrontation and still believed she had his best interests at heart. But doubt had begun to creep in. Unable to shake the feeling that something wasn't right, Ethan began to observe her more closely. Clara always kept her phone on silent and never left it unattended. If he happened to glance over while she was texting, she would quickly lock the screen or turn it away. She changed her passwords, deleted browser history, and stopped mentioning where she was going altogether. Ethan, a tech expert by profession, finally decided to investigate further. He installed a hidden camera in their living room under the guise of extra home security and used old software to recover deleted messages from Clara's synced cloud account. What he uncovered was worse than he could have imagined. Clara had been having not one, but 3 separate affairs. The first man was a fitness trainer she met at the gym, muscular and flashy, someone she referred to as her secret motivation. The second was a wealthy real estate investor she had been seeing on and off even before her wedding to Ethan. The third was a 22-year-old college student she claimed to be mentoring through a lifestyle mentorship program. Each of the men thought they were special, unaware of the others, and all of them believed Clara was trapped in a miserable marriage with an emotionally distant husband. Ethan read through the flirty messages, the hotel bookings, and the selfies they exchanged. His heart broke with every word. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. The woman he had married, the one he had trusted with his life, had built a web of lies so intricate that it felt like their entire relationship had been a performance. For Ethan, the fantasy was over. Reality had arrived, and it was far darker than he had ever imagined. Ethan's world had become a quiet storm. Each day he woke up next to Clara, pretending everything was normal, but inside he was unraveling. The evidence of her betrayal played on a loop in his mind. The photos, the messages, the credit card statements. He couldn't unsee what he had discovered, and yet he still hadn't confronted her directly about it. A strange part of him clung to denial, hoping maybe there was some explanation, some misunderstanding. But deep down he knew the truth. Clara, meanwhile, carried on with her glamorous life, seemingly unaffected. She traveled to photo shoots in Los Angeles, filmed skincare routines in their kitchen, and posted affectionate couple photos with Ethan that were nothing more than a digital illusion. To the world, they looked like a dream couple. In reality, Ethan was a broken man living under the same roof as a woman he no longer recognized. Then came the insurance policy. Ethan was organizing financial files when he stumbled upon the documents. Clara had taken out a $2 million life insurance policy in his name, with herself as the sole beneficiary. It was dated just 12 days after their wedding. Shock turned to fear as he dug deeper and realized his signature had been forged. Around the same time, he noticed irregularities in his bank account, with small amounts being transferred to a new account he didn't recognize. When he followed the trail, it led to an offshore account in Clara's name. At that moment, something inside Ethan snapped. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore, it was criminal. She hadn't just cheated on him, she was stealing from him, plotting a future that didn't include him at all. Every memory they had built together now felt like part of an elaborate scam. He contacted a lawyer, gathered the evidence, and made copies of everything: emails, financial records, camera footage. The lawyer advised patience and caution, warning that if Ethan acted impulsively, it could jeopardize any legal case. But patience was not something Ethan had left. He became a shadow of himself, paranoid, withdrawn, consumed by the idea that he had been played so completely. He began isolating himself, stopped going to work, and rarely responded to friends. In his solitude, he bought a gun, justifying it to himself as protection. In reality, it was something darker, a symbol of control in a life that had spun far beyond his grasp. Ethan tracked Clara's movements obsessively, documenting where she went, who she met, and how long she stayed. He watched her walk into hotels with other men, smiling, carefree, as if she didn't have a husband waiting for her at home. His heart had turned to ice. He stopped feeling sadness. All that was left was anger and disbelief. He couldn't understand how someone could fake love so easily, how a person could look into your eyes and lie with such ease. He wasn't sure what he was going to do yet, but one thing had become painfully clear. The woman he had married didn't love him, never had, and the life he thought he had built was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion waiting to collapse. It was a cool Saturday evening when everything finally fell apart. Ethan had spent the day in silence, his mind heavy, his body unmoving as he sat on the living room couch, staring at nothing. Clara had left early that morning, dressed in a designer outfit, claiming she was filming Content with Friends. Ethan already knew the truth. He had seen the hotel reservation on her phone the night before, another secret meeting with the college student she'd been seeing for months. He had followed her once, watched her laughing with the young man as they walked into a downtown hotel, hand in hand like lovers without consequence. Ethan didn't follow her this time. He didn't need to. He knew where she was, who she was with, and how this night would end. Just like all the others, with her returning home and pretending she'd been out with friends, maybe offering a half-hearted smile or a tired kiss on the cheek. But this time, something inside him had shifted. He wasn't angry in the explosive way people imagine rage. Instead, he was numb, still, methodical. The emotions had burned through him for so long that now there was only cold purpose. Clara came home after midnight, stumbling slightly as she kicked off her heels and dropped her designer bag onto the floor. Her phone was pressed to her ear, and she was laughing, her voice loud and careless. She didn't even notice Ethan sitting in the shadows of the living room at first. When she finally saw him, she paused, offered a casual greeting, and turned her attention back to her conversation. Ethan didn't say a word. The gun he had bought weeks ago lay beside him, loaded, untouched until now. As Clara walked toward the hallway, he stood up. His hands were steady, his breath slow. There was no confrontation, no shouting, no final accusation. He simply raised the gun and pulled the trigger. One shot hit her in the chest. Clara gasped and stumbled, dropping her phone. She turned toward him in shock, but before she could speak, 2 more shots followed, one to the neck, the last to the head. She collapsed instantly, her body sprawled across the hardwood floor, eyes still open, a crimson pool quickly spreading around her. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Ethan stood still for a moment, his face blank, the gun slipping from his hand to the floor. Then, in an eerie calmness, he picked up her phone, ended the call that was still active, and walked to the kitchen. He dialed 911 and confessed in a soft, even voice. He gave them the address, told them his name, and said, "I killed my wife." When the police arrived minutes later, they found Ethan sitting on the living room floor, hands folded, staring at the lifeless body of the woman he had once loved. He didn't resist arrest. He didn't cry. The weight of everything he had endured had already broken him. There was nothing left to say. The story was over. News of Clara Monroe's murder exploded across social media and national headlines within hours. Her status as a rising influencer, combined with the shocking nature of the crime, made the story irresistible to the public. Photos of her perfectly curated online life, vacations, designer gowns, romantic captions with Ethan, now stood in stark contrast to the gruesome truth beneath the surface. Overnight, their fairy-tale marriage was recast as a chilling tragedy. Ethan's confession was clear and detailed. The evidence he had compiled, phone records, emails, surveillance footage, financial documents, supported everything he had told the police. Still, nothing could justify the act of murder. He was charged with first-degree homicide and denied bail. His mugshot, with hollow eyes and an expression of blank exhaustion, circulated online alongside glamorized photos of Clara, fueling speculation and outrage. During the investigation, the 3 men Clara had been involved with were each interviewed. One claimed to have had no idea she was married. Another admitted Clara had told him her husband was abusive and controlling. The youngest, the college student, appeared genuinely devastated, stating he thought he and Clara were in love. None of them knew about each other. Prosecutors used these details to paint Clara as a manipulative woman, but they made it clear that her actions did not excuse Ethan's crime. The trial began 6 months later and attracted massive attention. Cameras lined the courthouse steps. True crime podcasts, YouTube channels, and talk shows dissected every detail. Ethan's defense centered around emotional duress and psychological deterioration. A psychiatrist testified that he had suffered a mental collapse due to sustained emotional abuse, deception, and financial manipulation. The defense team argued that Clara had not only broken Ethan's heart, but had carefully orchestrated a web of deceit for personal gain, going as far as forging signatures and planning financial fraud. But the prosecution pushed back, emphasizing that Ethan had not acted in self-defense. He had planned his actions, purchased a weapon, and waited for Clara to return home. It was a calculated killing, not a spontaneous outburst. They reminded the jury that Clara, for all her flaws, had not deserved to die. After weeks of testimony and emotional appeals, the jury returned with a verdict, guilty of second-degree murder. The court acknowledged the psychological damage Ethan had endured, but could not ignore the premeditation behind the act. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18. In the years following the verdict, the story remained in the public eye. A documentary was made, books were written. Some painted Ethan as a victim pushed too far, while others saw Clara as a woman destroyed by her own greed. But for those closest to the tragedy, no narrative could undo what had happened. Ethan, now serving his sentence in a state prison, rarely speaks. He refused interviews and declined to appeal the verdict. When a reporter once asked what he would have done differently, he paused, then quietly replied, "I would have left." But by the time he saw the truth, it was already far too late.